Okay, so here we had a simple program that just displayed a heading that said function practice, and then displayed two user entered values, X and Y, and I'm going to add a couple more functions to this particular program. So in this example, I am just using void functions. Void functions is where a function that just executes a task and returns back to the main program. So you can send it information from the main program or from a different function if you want. And then when it completes, it just goes right back to where it was. So the first function I'm going to add in this example is a function to calculate the sum and average of, in this case, X and Y, the two variables that I'm working with. Now, I know from my previous examples, X and Y are in the main program, and if I want them in this function, I'm going to have to pass them in the parameter list. All right, so I want to calculate the sum and average. I'm going to use two new variables, sum and average. They're not going to be in the parameter list. Putting them in the parameter list means that I'm going to take them from the main program and pass them to this function. I'm not doing that. I'm only going to use these two variables inside this function, so that's where they get declared. So this is what's considered to be a local declaration, local to the function or inside the function. I'm going to divide this by 2.0 so that my answer is not a result of integer division, right? When we have an average, we want to promote this guy up to a double, right? And we can do that by dividing by 2. We could also do it with a static cast. Now remember, so here's our function. We have to have a prototype, so I'm going to copy the heading and I'm going to paste it up here. Now remember, our prototypes go up above main. This is the global portion of our program. It means everybody in the program has access to these. You only want to have your prototypes up here. Don't ever declare any variables up there. All right? Never. Bad programming practice. Okay, and then if I want the function to be called, I need to add a function call here in main. So I'm going to run this, and it says, here's my function practice, x is 6, y is 7. The sum of x and y is 13, which is correct, and the average is 6.5, which is also correct. Okay, I'm going to add one more function here just to show you that you can add any type of statement you want in functions. In this case, I'm going to put a decision statement in a function. So I'm going to write a function, let's say to determine the minimum value of x and y. So again, I'm going to make a new variable. I'll just call it min. So I'll say if x is less than y, oops, extra if in there, the minimum is going to be x, else the minimum is going to be y. What if they're equal? I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll just do that. So if they're the same, it'll just say, you know, the minimum is, it wouldn't really matter. In this case, it'll display x. Okay. And some of you might say, well, can't I just do these calculations here? Like, can I put x plus y in here? Can I put, sum divided by, yes, you can. But then when you get down to an example like this, you can't do that because you can't put an if statement here. So I think for beginning programmers, I believe it's easier to declare any variables you need, assign any values you need, and then have your output statements. Okay, so let's make sure I have a prototype. And then I need to call it. Okay, and I'm going to run this. Those the same values as before, and the minimum of x and y is 6. Now technically with an if statement I should run it again and put a smaller value in seconds. So let me put in 5 and 6, and it'll say the minimum value is 5 because I want to check my code once when x is the minimum and once when y is the minimum to make sure that my code is working, and it is. Okay. I talked about the order of the prototypes before. The order of these 4 statements or prototypes will work in any order. I like to put them in the order in which they're called. It just makes things nice and easy, like display heading. If I need to find it, it's going to be first, etc., etc. The call order is important, right? Main programs get executed sequentially. So it asks for x and y, then it calls the display heading, then the display xy, then the calculate sum average, then the determine min max. You can't just put these in random order, right? If I did put display heading down here, it's going to get called last, and when my program runs, the heading is at the end, right? Because that's the 4th statement that I executed. So order is always important. So make sure that you're calling things in the correct order. All right, so just a couple more things that I'd like to talk about. I'm going to talk about documentation for the purposes of, ours. What I want you guys to have is just a comment prior to each function definition that explains what the function does. This is very simple. Right, this guy displays the values of x and y, displays the sum and average, and this one displays the minimum. Okay. I'm also going to talk a little bit about prototypes. In our textbook, you'll also see that in the prototype only, the variables are optional. So you could do something like this if you want to. I think for beginning programmers, it's always easier to, just copy the heading, paste it at the top, and put a semicolon up here. But technically these are just like little placeholders, so this works as well. I tend to find that in a beginning programming class, as soon as I say this, people start leaving it off down here, and they're not optional down here. So I just bring this to your attention because it is covered. You don't have to do it that way. As we move into, more advanced programming, and in our next class we'll start to maybe get away from that, but for this class it's probably a good idea to put that in there. We also talked about the fact that in this simple example, x and y are just, we're just using these 2 variables, x and y, so it's fine to keep calling them x and y down here as well. They don't have to be called x and y in the function, right? I could call these like val1 and val2, but then I have to be consistent inside the function. Now you don't need to change them at this point. I'm just saying when display xy is called, whatever's in x will be passed into val1 and displayed here, and whatever's in y will be passed into val2 and displayed here. So again, it's okay, like when a function is called once, if you can keep the name the same, that's fine. As we get into more advanced programming and you call a function multiple times, you won't be able to do that, but just as we're getting started, it's okay to do for now. Let me just put this back as is. Make sure everything's still in running order. And that is how you write simple void functions.